Hey, hey. Hi, everybody. Now we're talking about Phil Collins in the live chat, and I know Steven is loving it. Um, Simon, it's not heresy to say you don't really like Phil Collins. I don't think the fact that you're a Brit has anything to do with it. I mean, tastes cross national and cultural boundaries. God knows there's plenty of American acts that I, as an American, still don't enjoy. So it's all good. Anyway, hi, everybody. Glad you could join me. As usual, I am going to be answering questions that were submitted ahead of time by my wonderful Patreon patrons and channel members. So if you have something you want me to see or something you want to ask or something you want to say in the live chat, um, please hold on to it until I get through the patron and member questions, and then I will spend the rest of the show paying attention to the live chat. Although I'll pick up Adams real quick because I just happened to see it and I don't want to forget about it. If you were asked to be a writer on season 4 of Picard, would you accept? No, not unless they were going to pay me like life changing amounts of money. No, first of all, there shouldn't be a season 4 of Picard. But if for some reason there was, and they said, "Hey, I mean, if they could, if they could, if I mean, to just be a writer, to just be like a writer in the writers' room, no, no, no." I was about to say, like, if the blue fairy came down and granted my wish that I could write a Star Trek show and have like a significant amount of control over it instead of just being a writer that contributed scripts to it or whatever. But my wish would also be a curse because the Star Trek show that I get is Picard. Like if I was being offered like the showrunner job, I might consider that, but that's obviously Fantasyland. That would never, ever, 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 ever happen. But no, generally speaking, no, I would not. I would not accept that offer unless they were prepared to pay me a much larger amount of money than they would ever pay a first time writer for that kind of a job. Anyway, let's go to the patron questions, shall we? Hi, everybody. Okay, here we go. Strap in. I was about to say strap on. That's very different. Um, Not that kind of podcast. Not that kind of live stream. Um, anyway, Larry Bliss has the first question, and Larry says, Larry Bliss still an ensign, but bucking for a promotion. Well, you just keep at it, buddy. In the same vein as my last question, who are some of the best actors, male or female, overall in the Star Trek franchise? I'd include Sir Patrick Stewart because of his Shakespearean training and excellent work in other projects, but what are your thoughts? Well, I mean, yeah, Patrick Stewart, obviously. DeForest Kelly, Leonard Nimoy are both brilliant actors. I actually have often said I feel like just judging just by the work on Star Trek, the original series, I think DeForest Kelly is the best actor in that cast. But obviously, Nimoy is brilliant as well. And moving on to TNG, I mean, he doesn't get a chance to show it as often as I wish he did, but LeVar Burton is a fantastic actor. He gets a few moments here and there as Geordi that kind of let you see what a really good actor he is. Brent Spiner is terrific. And if we're opening it up like to not just series regulars but recurring characters and guest stars, to me the most mind-blowing one will probably always be Louise Fletcher. I think the fact that Louise Fletcher is in a Star Trek show and she plays Kai Wynn, for those of you who aren't in the know, Louise Fletcher plays Kai Wynn. And she's one of my all-time favorite actors, and to just the fact that she's in a Star Trek show still, like 30 years later, 35 years later, blows my mind. I'm like, are you kidding? Like Louise Fletcher, the Oscar-winning actor who played Nurse Ratched in the film of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, is in Star Trek. That's the big one to me. So I would say Louise Fletcher is certainly one of the best, and maybe the best. In terms of like, if you judge her by her entire body of work, not just what she does on Star Trek, absolutely fantastic. The Broken One, and by the way, this is Dana, everybody, not Matt Hardy. Um, Wonderful. Anyway, happy Friday, Steve. Last Ask Away, you were asked about hidden gems and mentioned Built to Spill. How did you find out about them? It was one of those. It was kind of like the the musical version of the telephone game where you discover one artist because you were into another artist with Built to Spill. So I was, as you know, Dana, and as you probably remember from the good old days, I was and am a big fan of Ben Folds Five. I loved Ben Folds Five back in the day, and I still love. Still, I mean, some of their more recent work hasn't exactly grabbed me, but you know, their albums from the mid to late '90s to me are all still classics. And Ben Folds Five released an album called, I think it was called Naked Baby Photos, which was just a collection of like B-sides and demos and live stuff, just kind of a collection of stuff that couldn't really be released any other way. And it was kind of just a collection of odds and ends and oddities and rarities and stuff. And one of the tracks on that is a Ben Folds 5 cover of a beautiful song called Twin Falls, which is a Built to Spill song. And I heard the Ben Folds 5 version of that song and thought it was beautiful. And in the liner notes, which were written by Ben Folds, he speaks incredibly highly of Built to Spill and says that at the time they were all like huge Built to Spill fans and they loved playing Built to Spill songs in their shows. And so I thought, oh, this Built to Spill act sounds promising. So I, you know, dug up a couple of their albums myself. This was back in the old days when you had to actually go to the music store and buy music. So I would go to the music store at my local mall or wherever, and I found some Built to Spill records or, you know, Built to Spill CDs, and I got into them too. And now they are one of my favorite bands as well. So tip of the hat to good old Ben Folds for that. John Burns, the Trump trial wasn't suspenseful for those who didn't watch it. Boy, you've got me there. It's funny you mentioned not liking superstition in wrestling, because I did like that Kamala was a determined wrestler, except when he faced Jake's snake. And in 1996, when The Undertaker came up from under the ring to drag Diesel to hell. Now, that's some good old fashioned, see what I did there, superstitious action. That's not really what I'm talking about, though. I mean, people coming up through the ring is a little goofy, but even that isn't quite what I'm talking about. Like, a wrestler being afraid of the snake, you know, that's the, hey, people are afraid of snakes. Like, that's not supernatural. I'm talking about like they did stuff in the late 90s with The Undertaker where he was literally like calling lightning down on people. And they would do like a special effect in the arena where, you know, lightning would come down. And we were supposed to think like, oh, The Undertaker actually has the power over nature and can call lightning down at his command and start fires or strike people or whatever. That's the kind of goofy stuff that I'm talking about. The kind of stuff where you are, or, you know, I mentioned him a second ago, Broken Matt Hardy, you know, the Hardy Boys when they were in the broken phase of their career where they would do like teleportation. And it wasn't as egregious because when Broken Matt Hardy did it, it was usually kind of played for a laugh. You weren't really supposed to take it seriously. You're just supposed to kind of be like, oh, okay, they're just goofing off. You're not supposed to take it seriously. But, you know, it's stuff that couldn't really happen, right? It's clearly in the realm of fiction now and the realm of fantastic fiction, not just, you know, they're making this up. So that's what I'm really talking about when I say superstition in wrestling or supernatural stuff in wrestling. It's like when something happens that is not just goofy and over the top like it often is in wrestling, but when stuff happens that could not actually happen. I'm like, okay, I don't know if we really need this. I don't know if this makes it better. Like pro wrestling just at its natural level is already really wacky and goofy and over the top. I don't know if we need to be adding in, oh, by the way, some of these wrestlers have superpowers and you're supposed to, you know, within that's part of the fiction we're asking you to accept that they have superpowers. I don't know about that. Danny K. Hey, Steve, let's say hypothetically that your city's chamber of commerce or state tourism came to you and asked you to create promotional materials for where you live. What would you highlight if you wanted to encourage people to come visit? Thanks. Hope all is well. You know, at first I thought this was going to be a little bit of a challenge because I have for the entirety of my YouTube career and for quite a bit longer than that as well, just to a much smaller audience. I have talked shit about the city of Hagerstown, my hometown, the city where I was born, not technically the city where I grew up and spent my childhood, but the city where I was born and the city where I live now, Hagerstown, Maryland. I've always talked about what a fucking shithole it is, but after I gave this question some thought, I realized there are a couple of things about Hagerstown that I really like and that I would recommend to people if I were in charge of trying to, put our best foot forward and try to encourage people to come here. Don't come here. But if that was my job, I would say, first of all, we just opened a brand new, and I mean brand new as in like 2 months ago, a brand new minor league baseball stadium, Meredith Park. I haven't actually been there I haven't been to a game there yet. I'm still kind of trying to decide when I want to go, but I definitely want to go see at least one game there this year. But I've driven past it. It's right in the heart of downtown. It is beautiful. A brand new state-of-the-art minor league ballpark. Absolutely gorgeous. So I would recommend people come and take in a ball game at our brand new awesome ballpark that we have, that there have been multiple false starts in trying to get built for honestly decades at this point, and they finally fucking did it. They finally built a brand new ballpark right in the middle of Hagerstown, and it's wonderful. So that's number one on the list. Number two, we have the Maryland Theater, which is a 100-plus-year-old theater that it has been many things. It's been a live performance art space. It's been a movie theater. Now it's kind of both. Like they occasionally will show movies there as like special events, but it's mostly like a performing arts theater. And it is the home of the Maryland Symphony Orchestra. And the Maryland Symphony Orchestra has regular concerts there throughout the year. And I haven't been to one for quite a few years, but I have been to MSO concerts at the Maryland Theater on occasion in my life, and they are wonderful events, and I would highly recommend coming to see that or whatever else show or concert might be showing at the Maryland Theater that would pique your interest. And we have a relatively new, great, big, beautiful public library that is right down the block from the Maryland Theater. That is, I think, it's less than 10 years old. It's maybe 6 or 7 years old at this point. But again, beautiful, one of the largest buildings in the city, and just a beautiful brick facade, and inside just a wonderful, gigantic public library. And what's in? Oh, and there are at least 3 currently operating community theater groups that are regularly putting on shows throughout the year. So yeah, I mean, weirdly enough, for all this shit I've talked about it, and deservedly so, I'm not letting Hagerstown off the hook for any of the bad stuff I've ever said about it, but there is, for a city the size of Hagerstown, and for all of the disadvantages that Hagerstown has, there's a fairly decent local arts and music and kind of, local cultural scene. And plus an awesome ballpark. So yeah, I would focus on that aspect of it. And I would leave out all the racism and poverty. Some random geek who may be doing jury duty. Yes, this is true as I write this on Monday, so I might miss the ask away if I have been selected to serve on a jury for a trial. Well, spoilers, I saw you in the chat, so maybe that's not true. I finished the questionnaire. I must show up to court on Wednesday for jury selection. The only thing I will share about the questions is that I was asked, do you have emotions associated with cops? Whether positive or negative. I chose yes. And when asked, is there anything you would like to share that could prevent you from being an impartial juror? If yes, please give detail below. I chose yes and said, well, I am an anarcho-syndicalist with radical far left-wing politics and negative opinions on policing as it currently is. I will leave it up to you if that may impact this trial. I don't have an issue with being a juror, except I will make less money because I can't work overtime at my job, and having far less take-home pay will impact my ability to give money to Joanna, Phoenix, and Joey. So, Steve, what are the chances I will be selected? Well, again, I feel like I already know that you weren't selected because I saw you in the chat earlier, but I feel like I'm a radical left-wing person politically, and I have, I have negative opinions about policing as it currently. I feel like that, probably was your ticket out. I'm just guessing, and Good for you. I mean, not it had the benefit of being true in your case, like you're just telling the truth, and it was probably disqualifying in the eyes of the district attorney. Um, David Colby, fresh from the neutral zone, having found the measure of a man after leasing some silence. Justice, code of honor. I've been watching TNG, starting from season 1. Hot take, it's really good. My girlfriend made fun of my first submission because it was just me talking about why TNG was good and said, Steve is going to start wondering if you know what a question is. So I tried to write another question, and it was just me getting really mad about Strange New Worlds again. So third time is the charm. Enterprise D, while exploring the outer reaches of the galaxy, finds a warp-capable alien colony ship with 500,000 people aboard and a makeshift flotilla in escort, some battleships and carriers and such, enough to protect them, but not enough to win a war. They're from a world which was incinerated by an evil empire and are the last of their species. They're being hunted by this empire with the goal being their extinction. Would Picard intervene to assist them, or is that a prime directive issue? I think Worf might want to join in purely because it's one hell of an honorable cause to fight for in a war. Well, it would depend on where you want the conflict and the story to come from. I think either way, it would be worth it to make it a prime directive issue. Either it's a prime directive issue because Picard himself thinks that it would be against the prime directive to help these people and is reluctant to do so, or Picard sees this as an occasion where it would be appropriate to break the prime directive and for Starfleet to step in and help these people, but Starfleet Command has a different opinion, and then in order to do the right thing and help them, Picard has to defy Starfleet Command and try to do something with the Enterprise by itself anyway. And I feel like I think that one is the better way to go. Have Picard be on board with wanting to help them relatively early on, and the conflict and the resistance is coming from over his head from Starfleet Command. I think that is a more interesting predicament to put Picard in, so that he's not just wrestling with his own conscience, but there's a more concrete thing that he is opposed by. It's the agency, the service that he works for, that he is bound to serve, is telling him, you can't do that. It's against our rules. And Picard has to defy those rules to go do the right thing instead of grappling with his own, inner turmoil. It's much more dramatic to have him have to actually defy something, external to himself. So I would go with that. And I think either way, Picard would end up trying to help. Ben Douglas, hi Steve. As most of us probably know by now, Star Trek Prodigy Season 2 will be releasing on Netflix on July 1st. What are your thoughts on the Netflix model of just releasing all the episodes of a show at the same time versus the more traditional model of releasing one episode a week? I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on how content creators who usually cover one episode per video, podcast, whatever, should deal with it if Netflix drops all 20 episodes in one shot. Musings on the topic more broadly are, of course, welcome and encouraged as well. I see people grappling with it, and I really don't see the issue, to be honest. First of all, I personally have no problem with the Netflix model. I'm perfectly happy to get all the episodes at once. That way, if it's a good enough show, if it's compelling enough that I want to keep watching, I have the option to binge the whole thing in one day if I have time, or watch, 2 episodes tonight and 2 episodes tomorrow, or 3 episodes or whatever. Like, I think the all episodes at the same time model is perfectly fine. And as for the impact that it has on reviewers, I don't just make your reviews on your schedule. Figure out a schedule and make your reviews. Like that, because that's what print reviewers do. If you ever on like the AV Club, if the AV Club has a streaming show where they are reviewing every episode of it, and it's been released with, the Netflix model where all of the episodes of a season drop all at once, they work out a schedule where they put up reviews of the episodes in order, Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever. Like you work out a schedule and you do it. If you want to review every single episode of a series and it drops 20 episodes at once on Netflix, then you watch the episodes and you write your reviews and you make your videos and you work out a schedule to do that and to release them. Like I really don't see what the issue is. What is the issue? What is the problem? So no, I don't have a problem with, I mean, I am not planning on reviewing Prodigy on an episode by episode basis. I am planning to do what I did with Discovery this year and what I did with Prodigy last time, which is wait until I've watched the entire first season and then make a video just about the entire or second season. Wait about watch the entire second season and make a video just about my thoughts on the whole thing. That is my intention. So the episode by episode review thing doesn't really affect me. But if I was planning on reviewing each individual episode with a separate video, or 2 episodes per video or whatever, you watch it, you work out a schedule for your video production, and then you do it. Like, this isn't rocket science. M.W. Ridra, finally my adventures with Superman is back. Supposedly, the showrunners have planned for 4 seasons, and I hope they get it. In a podcast, OSP referred to this version as the platonic ideal of Superman. And that made me wonder how you think this Clark/Superman compares to those that have come before. Which Supermen do you think have been done better? Which have been worse? At any rate, I hope you are enjoying the show as much as I am. P.S. It is my 40th birthday tomorrow. Well, happy birthday! And we've talked about it before. I mean, I love my adventures with Superman. The new episodes of the second season have been terrific so far. And I'm looking forward to the new episode this week. And yeah, I really, really like it. What versions of it do I think have been done better? I mean, look, I don't think it's better than Christopher Reeve. I don't think it's better than the Fleischer Brothers cartoon, and it's still relatively early. I mean, we've only had the first season was 10 episodes. We're 3 episodes, about to be 4 episodes into the second season. So we haven't gotten a lot of it, to compare to other more tenured versions of the character. But I mean, by the time it's over, it'll probably be pretty high. Like if the quality level of the series continues where it's at, if the rest of the show is as good as it has been up to this point, I'm probably going to wind up rating it pretty high, because I mean, it has done such a good job of keeping what has worked about most other versions of Superman and changing things and adding in, new things and fresh interpretations of things that are clearly, the ideas of these particular creators, but doing it in a way where it doesn't feel like they're changing stuff just for the sake of it. It doesn't feel like they said, okay, well, we have to do this way because these guys did it this way and ours version has to be different. Like, it feels natural. It feels like it's driven by a truly creative process where they're trying to service their takes on these characters. And it's been terrific so far. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm comfortable at this point saying, well, to me, it's the third best version of Superman. I don't know, but it's probably going to end up ranking pretty high for me if the quality that we have seen so far is maintained. And if it does get that 4-season run that they're hoping for, and it's this good for all 4 of those seasons, then it's probably going to be pretty high, because I really, really like it a lot. Andy Lawler, hey, Steve, I was born and grew up in Roanoke, Virginia, a railroad town essentially built by Norfolk and Western Railway, and thus was raised around trains. Living in the Midwest now, where passenger rail is much thinner on the ground than in your part of the country, I don't travel much by train. I do enjoy traveling by train. Trips between St. Louis and Chicago are a cheap and fun way to take in a Cubs-Cardinals game at Wrigley. Go Cards. I'm heading out on vacation this weekend, flying to Seattle, but then taking Amtrak the rest of the way to San Francisco, then cross country to Chicago, and finally back home near St. Louis. I'm a huge advocate for high-speed rail and think this country could be much better served by such a system, one like those in Europe, Japan, and Australia. What are your thoughts on train travel, high-speed rail, and have you traveled by train? Thanks and have a great weekend, everybody. I love trains. I am the grandson of someone who worked on the railroad for 30 plus years. My grandfather, my dad's dad, in whose house I am sitting right now, uh, worked on originally the Western Maryland Railroad, and then eventually it was bought out and became part of Chessie Systems Railroad, CSX. He worked he worked there for over 30 years, and Hagerstown is still a hub of CSX. There's a CSX, the CSX train yard where my grandfather worked, is still there and still active, and still is still in business. So I mean, I love trains. I've loved trains my whole life. I haven't done as much train travel as I would like. I mean, unless we're counting the DC Metro, which is how I get around DC. Whenever I go to DC, I never drive all the way into DC. I always drive in to Shady Grove, which is the outermost metro station, and take the metro to get around in DC whenever I'm there. But I haven't been to DC since before the pandemic. But unless we're counting that, I've only actually traveled cross country on a train once. And that was a few years ago, several years ago now. And I took Amtrak from Baltimore up to New York City and then back down, obviously. And that was great. I loved it. I loved it. And I would love to do more train travel. And yes, I'm a very, very big advocate for high-speed rail. I think it would be a wonderful thing. I wish we had it. I hope we do have it someday. There's no reason not to. It would, an affordable cross-country high-speed rail system would make this continent so much more accessible to people than it is now. Like, yeah, I know plane tickets aren't that expensive as they used to be, and something, if you have a reliable car, you can drive. But I mean, there's just something about the speed and convenience of traveling by train that if there was a high-speed rail system and it was affordable to the average person, I think it would be a wonderful thing, and I would definitely take advantage of it. Brian Baker wanted to say thanks for the hilarious video on Starfleet chaplains. The absurdity of a time traveler getting a signature from Peter is sublime and perfectly sarcastic. Curious, what are your thoughts about the future of Trek on Paramount Plus? Do you think that the producers can pull out of the down spiral that Discovery hit this season? Keep up the good work. Is it on a down spiral? I mean, I'm not sure what the viewership numbers overall for Discovery were, but I know that at least a couple of the episodes of Discovery of season 5 of Discovery broke the top 10 of the most streamed new, streaming episodes for that week. So, I mean, my impression is not that the last season of Discovery did poorly. I don't know exactly how it did. Streaming services don't release raw numbers for things like that usually. So I don't know, how many views it got or whatever, or how many subscriptions it drove to the service. I honestly have no idea, but the impression I get definitely is not that it was poorly received in a commercial way. So I don't know if there is a downward spiral. And I mean, Paramount Plus, at least for the moment, Paramount seems to be willing to invest in Star Trek for that platform. We're getting another season of Strange New Worlds, and then another season after that. Strange New Worlds has already been renewed for a season 4. We're getting the new Starfleet Academy show. We're getting the Section 31 movie, and who knows what beyond that. It seems like they're, at least for the near future, they're substantially committed to putting new Star Trek on that platform. So for the next few years, at least, it seems like the future of Star Trek on Paramount Plus is pretty good. Beyond that, who knows? I mean, nothing lasts forever. Who knows what the future of Paramount Plus is going to be? I saw an article just yesterday, in fact, that speculated that if if Paramount Global is sold as it's trying to be, it's purchased by some other entity, or it merges with something or whatever, that Paramount Plus might change, that the Paramount Plus might go away as like a standalone service. It might merge with some other streaming service, or, become something else. Kind of like Hulu and Disney Plus. Like Hulu is sort of gradually merging with Disney Plus. I think eventually Disney Plus and Hulu are just going to become one service. So maybe something like that will happen with Paramount Plus in the future, but I don't know. And for right now, it seems like the future of Star Trek on it, just based on the amount of stuff that is in production or has been announced for future production, it seems like it's pretty good for the moment. Agent Meister, too much style for one name to contain. Peldor Joyce, Steve, let me paint a picture for you. You're in a public place like a park or a bus, and you notice that someone is getting a hard time from a person/persons. The more you observe, the more you realize that this person is a member of a minority group, Black, Asian, Hispanic, and she or he are getting a hard time because they're a member of a minority. What would you do? I've somehow not seen this yet, but I've been asking myself what I would do if I did. I'd like to think I'd do something, but I don't want to end up in hospital if I can help it as a result of trying to take these racist scumbags down. But I know if I do nothing, I'll be kicking myself for a long time after. So what would the Shivesian approach be? This sort of behavior, and worse besides, is on the rise in Ireland, where I'm from, a country that has seen millions of its citizens migrate for a better life elsewhere for nearly 200 years. And any Irish person who acts like this toward an immigrant is a fucking disgrace. Well, I agree with you there. Any person from anywhere who acts that way towards an immigrant is a disgrace. But yes, especially with the particular history of Irish folk, I agree with you completely. I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I would like to think that I would do something. I would like to think that I would step in and try to calm things down and intercede on behalf of the person being abused. I would like to think that, but I too have never been in that situation. I've never faced that choice. I'd like to think I would do something. Of course, there's an even more optimistic part of me that would like to think I wouldn't have to do something, that someone else would beat me to it, that kind of behavior would not be tolerated by enough other people around, that it wouldn't be up to me to step in as a sole hero and say, no, don't you stop that right now. Like other people would beat me to it and would stop it from escalating or from happening beyond its, initial stages or whatever. That's probably too optimistic, especially in the area that that I live in. But no, I would like to think I would do something, but I honestly don't know because I've never been in that situation. But clearly stepping in and doing something would be the right thing to do. General Contact Unit Problem Child. The other day, Aaron Ra put out a video about Project 2025, where he said he's worried that a channel like his, a progressive-leaning atheist channel, might be banned if Trump wins. He also said he's worried that non-Christian religions might be banned. Am I overly optimistic for saying I think those fears are hyperbolic? Even if Trump does win, democracy might die if Trump wins, but people in undemocratic states typically still get to have YouTube accounts as long as they're not seen as threatening the state too much. It's not going to be like 1984. It'll seem normal, and that's why we should be alert. Yeah, I tend to agree more with you than with that, what you're describing Aaron's concerns being. The problem to me won't be that the Christian nationalists will take over and then immediately they will ban other religions. It's that the Christian nationalists take over and then they are responsible for making and carrying out the laws, and those laws will be legislated and executed and enforced in ways that will, prejudicially disadvantage members of other religions. And maybe eventually we'll get to the point, if this regime is allowed to maintain power for long enough, maybe eventually over time we get to a 1984 like situation where, other religions are outright banned and YouTube channels with, undesirable politics are taken down, and there's like overt, undeniable government mandated censorship and that kind of thing, on a vast and undeniable scale. Maybe eventually that happens, but I don't think it's going to happen right away. I think I agree with you. I think it will, to people who aren't paying close attention, it will seem relatively normal. It won't be like immediate police state, you know. It will be, I mean, to some people it'll feel that way. To people who, there will probably be people under Trump, it'll most likely be immigrants, and undocumented immigrants, but probably eventually legal immigrants as well. They're anti-immigrant no matter whether you're documented or undocumented. To people like that, it will feel like a police state, and it will, in all practical purposes, be a police state. Like they will be targeted for that kind of treatment. But to the vast majority of Americans, it will probably not feel all that different on a day-to-day basis. And that's, I think you're right. That's why we should be alert. That's what makes it so insidious and so dangerous. Because if most people in their everyday lives don't feel any different, don't feel like their freedoms have been restricted, don't feel like democracy has been killed, right? Then there's less will in the public to change it. I mean, look at how many people are still planning on voting for Trump after his first 4-year term. Like, you would think, holy shit, why would anybody vote for this guy again? He had 4 years to show us what his presidency is like, and it was a complete disaster on all fronts. Like, how would anybody want to vote for him again? But it's because on a day-to-day basis, for most of us, on a day-to-day basis, it wasn't all that different. And especially to people in the country who don't pay close attention to the news, who don't have their nose in politics very much, who are worried about going to work and paying their bills and raising their kids and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it probably doesn't feel that different at all. And yes, that is the danger of it. That's one of the dangers of it. Stephen G. Clenard. Hey, Steve, there's a credible rumor going around that auteur Todd Haynes will be a recurring director of Star Trek Legacy. I vehemently disapprove. The superfans demanding Star Trek Legacy deserve nothing less than Jonathan Frakes, LeVar Burton, or Michael Dorn as director of every single episode. After all, a proper Star Trek series requires significant TNG connections to establish credibility, and it's expected, nay demanded, that Riker, LaForge, and Worf appear frequently in the show. Anyway, what's your favorite Todd Haynes movie? Mine is Velvet Goldmine. Fight me on this. Hashtag I gots the mott. Far From Heaven. Far From Heaven is my favorite Todd Haynes movie. And you're forgetting, I know you're doing a TNG thing, but you also have to remember, Robert Duncan McNeil has also become a director of note. Now, he was not a TNG guy; he was a Voyager guy, but still, you gotta throw his name in the mix. Sent Merck. Hey, Steve, I watched the first episode of the new Who Killed WCW series by the Dark Side of the Ring folks, and it had me thinking, would you rather have Hulk Hogan as the third man in Vienna or have Harry Lime as the third man in the NWO? What a great question. Which would you prefer? And please fantasy book out a little bit of how each of those would go. Well, I'm not going to do each of them, but I will do Harry Lime as being the third guy in the NWO because that is what I would prefer. For the promos, if nothing else, imagine if Harry Lime, played, of course, by the great Orson Welles in one of his great film roles ever. Imagine Harry Lime being revealed as the third man in the NWO in July 1996 at Bash at the Beach. Imagine the promo. Imagine the fans, because of course the fans would be shocked that Harry Lime would have been revealed as the third man in the NWO, and they'd be pelting him with trash and drink cups and et cetera, just like they did Hogan. Mean Gene gets in the ring and he says, Harry Lime, look at all the crap in this ring. What do you have to say for yourself, sir? And Harry Lime could say, Gene, look at all the people out here in this crowd. Look at all the faces. From our lofty perch here in the middle of the ring, don't these faces look as tiny as just a crowd of ants? And what if I were to tell you, Gene? What if I were to tell you that you could make $1 million or more a year on a guaranteed contract and have creative control, and all you had to do was break the hearts of a few of those ants here and there? Tell me, old man, would you really tell me to keep my money? And, that would be the first big promo from the Harry Lime version of the NWO. It would definitely have a different soundtrack, lots more zither music than the NWO had. But I would go for it. Don Quixote. I live in Pennsylvania, a so-called swing state. What answer would you give someone who asks, how can you support Biden? He's financing the genocide in Palestine. I can't deny that, but I would never vote for Trump or give up my vote by staying home. I would say that Trump would continue to finance the genocide in Palestine, and would probably, not only would he do even less than Biden has done to stop it, and obviously Biden hasn't done very much to stop it. He hasn't even done as much as he said he would do to stop it. That whole bit a couple weeks ago where he said, if the Israeli army invades Rafah, they're not gonna do it with our weapons. And then he was like, nah, never mind. So I mean, in no way am I going to defend Biden's actions relative to Gaza at all, but as I mentioned in a video a couple weeks ago that I put up, where I talk about this, I mean, that we have every reason to believe that President Trump would be even worse for the people of Gaza than Biden has been. That not only would Trump continue to support the IDF in its destruction of Gaza and its mass killing of civilians, but Trump would also make life worse for Palestinian people in general by cutting off aid, by encouraging other countries to cut off aid, by persecuting Palestinian people who live in this country, by banning Palestinian refugees from this country. Like, there are all kinds of things that Trump has said he would do that, like I said in my video, even if you are a single issue voter and your single issue is Gaza, as difficult as it is, you should vote for Biden instead of Trump, because as awful as Biden has been on this issue, as absolutely awful. I mean, the bullshit, even coming out against the International Criminal Court, like that's really just indefensible shit from Biden. As bad as he has been, Trump would be even worse. So even if all you care about is the people of Gaza, and you don't give a shit about anything that happens to people in this country, all you care about is we're aiding and abetting a genocide in Gaza. Okay. Trump is worse. You should not want Trump to be president. If you care about those people, if you want to stop those people from being killed, if you want to use your vote to get the best possible deal for those people, you should not want Trump to be president. And that's just if all you care about is Gaza. If you care about other things, do you think that people should be allowed to have abortions? Can't vote for Trump. You have to vote for Biden. Do you think that we should at least have a chance of raising the minimum wage and altering our environmental policies to be more responsible when it comes to climate change, and pursuing student loan forgiveness and making college more affordable and strengthening labor unions and all of these things? I mean, Biden has not been as strong on really any of those things as I wish he had been. But compared to Trump, he's fucking Franklin Roosevelt. So no, I would say that if you want to give both the people of Gaza the best chance and people in this country the best chance, the better choice is clearly Joe Biden. For as fucked up as he is, for as disappointing and frustrating and outrageous as a lot of what he has done or chosen not to do is, he is clearly the better choice. And it's going to be one of two guys. I know people say, oh, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein. Oh, I'm going to vote for whoever. Well, okay, well, then you might as well just throw it in the garbage can. It's going to be one of two people, okay? And you can soothe your own conscience and say, well, at least I didn't vote for a genocider. Okay, good for you. Good for you. What about everybody else? At least you can sleep at night. Well, that's what's really important, right? Well, I didn't compromise my principles. Well, how wonderful for you. How wonderful for you. I'm sure that all of the people who will suffer as a result of a Republican president getting to appoint judges for the next 4 years will be comforted by the fact that at least you didn't compromise your moral purity. I'm going to get off on a tangent about that, so I'm going to pull myself in and say I would just focus on, look, Biden sucks, but the alternative is, if it's not Biden, it's Trump, and Trump is worse. Like significantly worse. Think about how bad you think Biden is on all these issues, and then think that Trump is significantly worse on all of them, including Palestine. Cassie Volpine, the queer Avenger, not affiliated with Disney's Marvel's The Avengers, trademark. I can't think of a good question, but I'm paying for this, so... At the used bookstore downtown, I found a hardcover copy of Tough Guys Don't Dance. I'm maybe 20 pages in, and this Mailer guy sure seems to love the smell of his own farts, grammatically speaking. Any thoughts on Norman Mailer as an author? P.S. Oh, God. Oh, man. Oh, God. Oh, man. P.P.S. I haven't gotten to the oh, God, oh, man part, or the Mr. Regency and I make love 5 times a night. That's why I call him Mr. 5 part, or the you got no womb part. P.P.P.S. Maybe I should just watch the movie instead. You know what? I have very little opinion on Norman Mailer because I've never read him. I've never read him. So I can't say whether I like him or not. I get the impression I probably wouldn't like him because I get the impression that he does seem like an author that is kind of full of himself, or was kind of full of himself. And for that reason, I have not been especially compelled to seek out his work, despite, you know, how large he looms in American fiction over the last, you know, in the latter half of the 20th century. But no, I've never actually read him, so I can't really give you an informed opinion on that. Isaiah Taylor says, Steve, I was going to describe my Moths movie poster, but decided to change the topic. It's the 80th anniversary of the D-Day, but I don't feel like celebrating. What's to celebrate? We have world leaders who are aiding a genocide, and fascism is on the rise in Europe. We're also losing our rights and freedoms as we see everything from book bans to violent suppression of free speech on college campuses. Much of the Western world, with the exception of a few nations, don't believe that the Palestinians should have a state. In a way, we are now the Axis powers. I did watch Saving Private Ryan last night, but how did you commemorate the anniversary of the D-Day landings? I guess it's a priorities thing. We fought Nazis one day only to become Nazis later on down the road. Personally, I didn't do anything to celebrate. I mentioned it because it was Wednesday, so I mentioned it on Dana and I's live stream Wednesday night. But no, as far as like what did I do to mark the occasion myself, I didn't do anything. I didn't watch a particular movie or go anywhere or whatever. I didn't do anything. I don't know if it's necessary. I mean, it's always worth celebrating an event like that, which marked the beginning of the end of fascism in Europe in the 40s. So it's worth celebrating that and commemorating that and showing gratitude and honoring the people who did that, regardless of whatever our present circumstances. But I think we can also use it as encouragement, because in terms of the rise of fascism, as bad as things are now in this country and in Europe, they're not as bad as they were in June of 1944, right? Just on that basis, in terms of, I mean, there's not a modern equivalent of the Third Reich doing what the Third Reich was doing back then, right? We're not there yet. And we don't have to get there, and hopefully we won't get there. But the optimistic part is, even if everything goes completely to shit in the next few years, even if things go as bad as they could go. That's not the end of history. I mean, we should all work as hard as we can and fight like hell to make sure that doesn't happen. We should make sure that in the United States, we should make sure, first and foremost, step one, Trump loses the election for president in November, and hopefully the Republicans lose a shit ton of seats as well, both at the federal level and at the state and local level. Like we should work for electoral defeats of fascists and fascist enablers. And we should do other things to push back the rising tide of fascism and authoritarianism and anti-Semitism and Christian nationalism and all these really ugly, destructive forces that are energized. But like I said, even if disaster strikes and things go as bad as they possibly could, that's not the end of history. You know, look at Germany in 1945, and then look at Germany in 2005. Right? There's always hope. There's always the opportunity for things to get better. There's always the opportunity. Like just because fascists take over doesn't mean that they've taken over for good. Right? Doesn't mean that they're indestructible and can't possibly be toppled. So D-Day could be a source of inspiration. It could be a cautionary tale. Hey, we shouldn't let it get this far to begin with, and we won't need to do this. But it should also be, even if somehow we completely take our hand off the wheel and everything goes to shit, it's still not without hope. We can still pull it back. Now, with incredible effort and sacrifice, but we can still pull it back. Cara Hughes, hi Steve. They've started showing a series called The Rookie, which demonstrates a fine example of plot armor. The Rookie follows the story of John Nolan, who, after assisting police officers during an armed robbery, decides to become a police officer. So since he's the hero of his own story, he does suffer from an absurd amount of plot armor. Everyone around him dies or gets badly injured or gets put on a bus. God, I hate that phrase. Do you think that sometimes plot armor can be a bit restrictive with the characters? It's one reason why I like George R.R. Martin. None of his characters are safe. I couldn't read his books more than once, but no character is safe. Although I really despise the random killing of the dire wolves. Anyway, my question is, do you think when you're locked into this plot armor story, e.g. Pride and Prejudice variations, where the reader knows that Darcy and Lizzie will get their happily ever after, that it can be quite restrictive to one's writing? Thoughts, please? Well, of course it can be restrictive, but I think it just depends on the storytelling. And it depends on how you look at it. I mean, I think I've made this point before. In a sense, every character in a movie that you've already watched has plot armor because you know what's going to happen, right? The first time you watch Star Wars, you might not know that Luke blows up the Death Star and that all the heroes make it out okay. I mean, even Obi-Wan kind of survives, you know, even though he gets killed in the feud with Vader, he lives on and inspires Luke at the end. Like, you don't know that the first time you watch Star Wars, but you know it after you watch it the first time. And most people, if they like Star Wars the first time and they watch it again, they still like it the second time, even though they know everything that's going to happen. So not knowing what's going to happen is not the only thing that makes a story compelling. You know, lots of us rewatch movies or reread books. We experience the same story over and over again to the point that we practically have it memorized. We know everything that's going to happen, but we still find it compelling. And if it's really good and it really gets us, in the moment, we still feel the same. Like, that's the incredible thing about it. You watch a movie where there's a really, really suspenseful scene where the life of the hero is threatened. If it's a really well-made film and it really grabs you, even if you've seen it 100 times and you know that they make it out of this situation okay, when you're watching it in that moment, you can still feel that sense of tension because it's just that good. It's that well done. So I think a lot of it depends on the storytelling and the execution. You know, I think plot armor is less of an issue. And also, I mean, do you expect the protagonist of most stories you read or watch to die? I mean, yes, it does. It does happen, but most of the time, especially if it's something that is like a part of a long running series, usually the lead characters make it out okay. So the idea of, well, there's no suspense, because I hear this complaint about prequels a lot. And there are lots of problems with, I mean, there are all kinds of reasons why a prequel can go south and end up not being good. But very rarely is my issue with a prequel that the characters have plot armor. Like, I know Jason and I have argued about this occasionally. We've talked about the movie, again, to take it back to Star Wars. I don't know why I'm talking about Star Wars specifically, but the movie Solo, the Han Solo prequel. Jason has said that, like, one of his problems with that movie is, oh gee, I wonder if they're going to make it out of this alive. Like, the characters are in this life-threatening situation, and it's like, well, we know they all make it out alive because they're all in Star Wars. Like, nothing's going to happen to Chewie, nothing's going to happen to Han. Like, they make it to the movies that are set later on. And that's true, but like, if the movie was better, I don't think you would care. Like, if Solo was a better movie, I don't think I'd be sitting there watching an action scene where Han's life was threatened or Chewie's life was threatened, thinking, oh, I know they survive. Like, you would get caught up in the moment. That's part of what filmmaking, storytelling, regardless of medium, that's part of what it is. You want your audience to be caught up in the moment. And it doesn't matter if you know what happens. You're not thinking about that. You're caught up in the moment. So, I think it depends. It depends on the quality of storytelling. Sometimes it can be a problem. Usually, if it's a good enough story, honestly, it's the kind of thing that almost never occurred to me until I started seeing people complain about it on the internet. Such and such character has plot armor. Okay, well, then if you're noticing that, it's probably a story that you don't like very much. Matthew Gretzinger. Hi, Steve. I loved your Do You See essay about David Mamet's Oleana. I had the misfortune of directing the play in the mid-90s. At the time, I did not feel like I was perpetuating misogynistic stereotypes. I recall reading an interview with Mamet in which he claimed to believe that he'd written John as a critique of institutional power and the misuse of such in higher learning. So I actually tried to direct the play from the perspective of believing that John is essentially the villain. But when I staged the play, the audience cheered when he hit Carol. So failure. My question is, do you think the play can be reasonably interpreted that way? My guess is the answer is no, but in any case, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Thanks for all your great work. I have only ever seen the film. I've never seen a stage version of it. But other comments in my video were other people made comments in my video saying that they have seen versions of it on stage where John came across more negatively. I think one example that people mentioned was there was a version, I think it was staged in London. It may have played other places as well, but I know it was in London several years ago, and John was played by Aaron Eckhart. And they said that Aaron Eckhart played him as much more of a villain, and his actions relative to Carol were, in that version, were staged to be much less innocent seeming than they are in the film. So I think it's possible. Now, is it possible to do it in such a way that misogynists in the audience won't still cheer when he smacks up Carol? I don't know, maybe not. But I think it's possible, theoretically, to at least present it in a way where it's more even-handed than it is in the film. I will say, I don't believe David Mamet when he says that he wrote John as a critique of institutional power. I don't think he is that oblivious and that lacking in self-awareness. I think Mamet has a plethora of problems and character flaws. I don't think he's that oblivious to his own biases and his own motivations. The film version of Oleana, which it is not only written by Mamet, but is directed by him. You watch that movie, And then you try to tell me that John, as portrayed in that movie, is meant to be a critique of the abuse of institutional power. I do not see how anyone could watch that movie and come away from it thinking, well, it was very critical of John's character and he was clearly meant to represent the abuse of institutional power. John is a victim in that movie, the movie that Mamet not only wrote but directed. So I would think it represents Mamet's vision for the story. It represents the version of the story that Mamet, the creator, wants the audience to see. John is a victim of Carol in that movie. Now, it doesn't mean that John is perfect, and it doesn't mean that John doesn't have flaws, and maybe there's an element of John that you could read some of his portrayal as critiquing a misuse of institutional power or something. I mean, I'm not saying that that's completely absent from the character, but to say that, I wrote him as a critique of misuse of institution, I do not find it at least not in the film. I do not find that to be the primary essence of that character at all. John is a victim. He's an innocent victim of overzealous feminism and political correctness in that film. And that's what I found so troubling and so outrageous and disgusting about it. I do not think Mamet is telling the truth when he says that he wrote John that way. Wolfie Basach, hi Steve. This week's terrifying tale from the toilet came during my first and only visit to Wales for a friend's wedding. It was late on, and after a fair few beers over the course of the day, I felt the possible need to make a visit. Annoyingly, there wasn't even a dribble, but just as I was about to zip up, in walked the biggest Welshman in God's blessed creation. Before I could get away, he'd unleashed his old chap and without considerate warning, blasted off. I don't know what he'd been drinking, but holy mother of Christ, he could have quelled a riot. Meanwhile, I was looking down at my pathetic excuse, silently begging for something, anything, but there was nothing in the tank. Meanwhile, the python taming act next to me was reaching its conclusion. The fella shook off like 4 fat nuns clapping and left, but not before patting my back and wishing humiliated me better luck next time. And so my question is, has your body ever let you down right when you didn't fucking need it to? Never in so entertaining a fashion. No, I cannot remember anything like that happening to me, but thank you for sharing that story. I am so sorry for your humiliation, but so grateful that your telling of it was so goddamn entertaining. That's a great story. Glenn H, salutations, Steve. As we said in the old days, longtime listener, first time caller. After getting hooked on your excellent Star Trek stuff, I delved further into all of your material, both new and old. I appreciate the scripting and presentation for even the simplest reviews. My favorite production you are involved with is Late Seating. This podcast, along with the advent of streaming, has been getting me into exploring classic movies that I have never seen before. My dilemma is that there are a bunch of these classics that everyone, including you, raves about, but I just can't get into. Don't hate them, just don't love them as much as everyone else seems to. I understand the adage, love what you love, but I always wonder if I should really like these lauded movies more. My question, have you ever found a movie that you have to admit is a classic, but you do not personally enjoy? I will not be able to view this live, so I look forward to watching your response tomorrow. The answer is yes, but it's also, I think what's more interesting is there are several films that are considered classics, broadly speaking, that once upon a time I did not like, that now I do like. And the two most obvious examples of that to me are Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life, especially like for years. Like I watched It's a Wonderful Life when I was a kid, when it was on, after Thanksgiving in the Christmas season. And it was always one of my dad's favorite movies. And I watched it and I was just like, did not care for it. And it was actually not until I watched it in preparation for us watching it on late seating, because we did it as our Christmas watch along one year. And I watched it before that, so I would have some thoughts about it and I could come up with some jokes to tell while we were watching it and stuff. Um, and to my utter surprise, I found myself loving it. I had always taken a very dim view of it, but then I watched it for late seating and I really, really liked it. And something similar happened with The Shining. I don't think it was related to late seating, but it was just, I had always thought The Shining was one of Kubrick's more underwhelming films. And Kubrick has always been one of my favorite directors. I've loved Kubrick stuff since I discovered his stuff. Like 2001 is one of my favorite films. Paths of Glory, one of my favorite films. Eyes Wide Shut, I saw in the theater 5 times. But The Shining never really did it for me. And then I watched it again several years ago now, a while ago, and I had an appreciation for it that I had never had before. And I don't know why. I don't know what changed. My own perception, maybe. I had seen more films. My taste had changed in ways that I was not aware of. Who knows? But all I know is I never used to like it. I watched it again for the first time in a while, and I really, really liked it. On the opposite side, I mean, I'm still not a huge fan of The Wizard of Oz. I appreciate it. Like I can appreciate, the accomplishment of it, and what a well-made film it is. And I mean, there's all kinds of things about it that I admire and appreciate. But does it get me right here? Is it one of my favorite films? No, no. I mean, the obvious example is Lord of the Rings. For at least the first two. The first two, as you may know, if you listen to the episodes of Late Seating where we reviewed this, because we've reviewed all 3 of the Lord of the Rings trilogy on Late Seating. For Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers, my opinion was, this is definitely not for me. I don't enjoy this. This is not my kind of thing. But there is obviously filmmaking of a high order going on here. And I can acknowledge that and appreciate it on a technical level, and even to a certain extent on an artistic level, even though it doesn't really move me. It's not really my thing. But Return to the King, I don't get at all. Return to the King, I thought, was a bad movie, like from top to bottom. That was of the 3. And of course, that's the one that won Best Picture. But I saw Return to the King and I was like, okay, the first 2, even though the first 2 are not my cup of tea, I kind of get it. Like I can appreciate them on a certain level. Return to the King, I thought, was just garbage from start to finish. I thought it was awful. So for 2 of the Lord of the Rings movies, I can say that they are movies that are generally regarded as classics that I just don't get, but I acknowledge that they, that there is a certain accomplishment to them. Shazy, good evening, Steve. Earlier this week, I woke up to the disappointing news that congestion pricing in New York City will be put on hold indefinitely. As an environmentalist and a soldier in the war on cars, plugging for a great podcast, by the way, I am exhausted at witnessing how useless Western authority figures are, continuously capitulating to private interests instead of doing the right thing and protecting the environment and, by extension, the well-being of our children and future generations. What will it take to change the paradigm and power dynamic? Hopefully, the answer is not armed struggle, but considering that those in power rarely give it up willingly, I'm not too sure. Thoughts? I mean, I think even the armed struggle would have to be precipitated by something. I think, unfortunately, it's going to take some kind of disaster. It's going to take something awful happening where a lot of people are hurt or killed, or a lot of destruction is wrought, for people to wake up and go, oh shit, maybe we should do something. Whether it's some kind of major environmental disaster that affects the cities that is clearly tied to climate change, and it makes people realize, oh, maybe we need to take this seriously after all. I fear it will be something like that. It will have to be something that shakes people, not just the wealthy and the powerful, but everybody else, shakes them out of complacency and makes the wealthy and powerful realize, okay, we have no choice but to do something about this, because all the people down below whose backs we're standing on aren't going to stand for this anymore. So we're going to have to actually do something to change this. But I hope it doesn't come to that, but I think it's probably going to take something really, really terrible happening. Air One Fire, who will destroy your death ray with his destructo beam as soon as your lightning shield is down. Hi, Steve. May was probably the worst month of my life, at least since 2020. The reason is, of course, extreme procrastination. I have two kinds of work. Statistics I can do easy. I have very little reluctance for it. And writing, which is fucking terrible. I had 3 big writing projects by around May 20th. I failed to deliver them. I only survived the month because 3 of my friends wanted to help me. Here's the stupidest problem. I think the reason I procrastinate so much with the writing projects is that I can't really hammer it into my head that I can succeed. I just can't believe I can do it. Even though I did the most stressful of those 3 projects this Monday in 4 hours. And this is a pattern that has been repeating for years. Now I have another by next Monday, larger but easier, and I still can't start because I think deep down I believe I can't do it. I know you're not a therapist, but what the hell is wrong with me? I'm a piece of shit is my immediate thought. Well, look, you are a piece of shit, but not for that reason. It's because of your taste in Star Trek uniforms, which we established on Wednesday. You can do this, right? You cited yourself. You said on Monday, you did the most stressful of these projects in 4 hours. So you can do this. I think, and again, I'm not a therapist. I don't know, but just judging from drawing on my own experience and things the feelings that I have had myself and insights into my own behaviors and thoughts that I have acquired over the years. If you tell yourself you can't do it, then you don't have to do it. And that's easier. That's really what it boils down to. It boils down to if I don't want to do it. And if I convince myself that I can't do it, that I'm just going to fail if I try, then I don't have to try. And that's not true. And it's not true. You have evidence just in your recent experience that it is not true, that in fact you can do it. But there's a part of you that just doesn't want to. So you tell yourself, I can't do this. I can't do this. So it gives you a reason to not even try. It's a way of letting yourself off the hook for failure, basically. But failure is not inevitable. In fact, success is the more probable outcome. Like, you can do it. So you just need to focus on that. And the hardest thing in the world, but the most essential thing in the world, is to just get fucking started. There are times when, and this, it sounds like it's a much smaller scale than what you're struggling with. But there are times when I know I have to write a video script and I don't really want to. I'm not really feeling it. I'm not feeling inspired. I'm not, eager to sit down here and start typing away, but I say, look, it's time to get this started. And I just start writing it. And even if I write stuff that I'm not happy with and I'm not sure that I'm even going to use, I just start writing it. And I tell myself, okay, let me get a page or 2 written so I can just say I've got it started. That's really important for me and for my motivation to say, all right, I'm just going to start it. Like, I can't let any more time go by without having at least started it. And sometimes that's the hardest part. Sometimes that's the biggest hill that I have to climb on the journey of writing that script, is saying, you know what, fuck this. I'm going to start this, So that project that you need to get done by next Monday, tomorrow, or whenever your next regularly scheduled work day is, sit down and just fucking start it. And you don't have to, if you can plow through and finish the whole thing in 4 hours like the other one, great, do that. But even if it's just getting it started, so you can say, okay, it's underway now, do that. Because sometimes that's the hardest part, because once you started, then you're in it. Now, once you've started it, then if you don't finish it, then you have to quit. And I think sometimes that's more difficult to justify and more difficult to live with than if you just convinced yourself ahead of time, oh, I'll never be able to do that. That's beyond my capabilities, so I'm just not going to start. Start it. Start it. Joe McClory on vacation now, first time traveling internationally. What is the farthest you have been from home? Tallahassee, Florida. And I believe this is the last question. Yes, from Russell. Hey, Steve, I've been debating with an online communist on why we disagree. And I hold no personal resentment towards him or his ideology, but we was talking, and one of the things brought up by me was that this country is $34 trillion in debt. And his response was, forgive the debt. My reaction is, it's not yours to forgive. That would be like me coming to you and say, forgive the membership fees and have you continue your hard work. And yes, you do awesome work on your channel. The point is, who am I to tell you to forgive fees? Also, said person believes in personal property, but not commercial property. But to own personal or private property, don't you need a certain amount of wealth, which would fall under capitalism? I'm confused. I am not a huge fan of the government. I made that position very clear. I think we need to tweak the capitalism ideology to allow others to gain success. I think we shouldn't have billionaires. I think the current government makes it impossible for people to get ahead. Thoughts? Well, as far as the debt forgiveness thing, I mean, look, I am by no means an economist or an expert in any school of economics. So I don't know whether it would be better to just forgive the national debt or not. I've heard people say, people suggest, well, that, the Treasury should mint a $34 trillion coin and use that to just pay off the debt. Like, I don't know what would be the best thing to do or not. I don't think it's quite, I don't think it's quite the right analogy to say it's like asking me to give up membership, to stop asking people to become paying members of the channel. Because in that scenario, I'm not the one in debt. Like I'm not $34 trillion in debt and saying, well, I'm just going to stop asking people to become patrons and members. And that'll like that. It's not the analogy doesn't work for me there. But as for the rest of what you say, I mean, it depends on what you're defining as wealth. Because like personal property could be, a toothbrush. That's the example that Dana uses a lot. Personal property could be a toothbrush. Would the amount of money required to purchase a toothbrush constitute what we would normally describe as wealth? I mean, I guess in a certain very strict definitional sense, yeah. I mean, you have money that you can afford to part with to buy this thing. So I guess it is a form of wealth. But when we think of wealth, we think of like significant amounts of money or self-worth or financial worth. So I don't know if all personal property would demand having wealth. The distinction I've most, and again, I'm not an expert in communist theory or socialist theory either, but the distinction I've most often heard is that the difference between personal property and private property is that private property is property that you primarily use to profit from, to make money from. Like it's a house you don't live in. Basically, if you have a house and it's your house and you live there, then that could be considered personal property. But if you have a house that you live in and then you have this other house that you rent out, or that you're only keeping as a part of your financial portfolio or whatever, that would be considered private property because you're generating income off of that. You're generating personal wealth off of that. That will be the distinction between personal and private property. But again, these are areas that I am not well read or well schooled in. So I really can't, express much of an opinion. I will agree with you that we do need to make some changes in the way we do things. because yes, it is far too difficult for people to get ahead. Not just get ahead, but keep their heads above water. That to me is the real problem at the moment. Not just, yes, it is too difficult for people to get ahead, but it's also too difficult for people to survive. And yes, there need to be some significant changes made in the way we run things to ease the burden of people who are so burdened. All right, that's it for the patron and member questions. Thanks to everybody who is a patron and a member. Now, before I turn my full attention to the chat, now that I have finished the patron and member questions, it is time for a brand new Stuffy and Friends short. Now, as usual, this Stuffy short will go up as its own standalone YouTube short on my channel tomorrow, starting at noon Eastern time. But because you wonderful and highly intelligent and possessed of incredibly refined taste people are here watching this live stream right now, you get to see the Stuffy short before anybody else. So please enjoy the premiere of this brand new Stuffy and Friends short.
And that was the 5th liquor store I worked at, and the only one from which I was not sacked for thieving.
Why were you fired from that one?
I wasn't fired. They stiffed me on me paycheck, and the next morning the place had inexplicably transformed to a pile of smouldering ash.
Jack, you staying for dinner?
When's that then?
The chili in the slow cooker will be done at 6, so around 6.
Beans in the chili?
Absolutely.
What kind?
Kidney, pinto, black, navy, and garbanzo.
What the hell are garbanzo beans doing in chili?
I mash them up and mix them in to create a ground beef-like texture.
Eh?
It's vegetarian chili.
I see. Bourbon in it?
As a matter of fact, there is some bourbon in it.
And have you any bourbon left over?
I do.
Then I'll stay.
Ta-da! Hope you enjoyed the new Stuffy short. Now, let me turn my attention to the live chat. Hello, everybody. Oh, David C. Drake, I like your little puppy dog icon there for Stuffy. All right, let me catch up on any super chats that I have missed. Yeah, Kirok sent in a member message that said, "Hey, Steve, my question has so much to be added. I will come back to it, but I also like taking a break between real world stuff and good films and TV, so I might skip a beat. Thanks for all you do." Okay. And then a super chat from Kirok. Thank you very much to remind me about the member message. And then a member message just came in from Joe Gutierrez, who says, "Bannon and Alex Jones are getting some consequences for their shit. Does it give you any reason to hope Trump will get, at the very least, house arrest?" I mean, I dare not hope. I usually, I prepare myself for the most disappointing outcome, right? I prepare myself for, oh, Trump's not going to get any jail time. I prepared myself for Trump being acquitted, right? I was mentally ready for that, so that if that happened, I would have still been disappointed and upset by it, but I wouldn't have been caught off guard. I wouldn't have had my heart set on the conviction, right? So when he actually got convicted, I was like, oh shit, all right. So I'm kind of in the same headspace as far as his sentence. I'm not expecting him to get the maximum sentence. I'm not counting on him getting any kind of jail time. So anything he gets is going to be like, oh, good. You know, I'm just sort of mentally preparing myself so that I'm not completely disappointed if he gets off incredibly light. MW Ridger says the My Adventures with Superman version of the character versus other iterations. You know, I mean, I think I've said before, like I appreciate that they lean a little heavier toward comedy with My Adventures with Superman than other versions have. I think that's one of the things that sets it apart, which I really appreciate. The fact that this version of Clark and the other characters too, Lois and Jimmy as well, like he's clearly a younger version of the character than we have seen before. I think that helps. He has just a different energy, just, you know, I mean, because like Christopher Reeve was, I think, 28 when he played Superman the first time. And if you do the math in the movie, the character is supposed to be 30 when he puts on the super suit for the first time. So he's not like old, but he's mature. He's a fully grown, mature adult. And the version of Superman in My Adventures with Superman is an adult, but he's like early 20s. He's much younger than we typically see Superman being when he is being Superman. So, and I think that helps to set it apart as well. And I do appreciate that. So, but again, as far as like, how does that compare with, the Christopher Reeve version or the George Reeves version or the Fleischer Brothers version or any of the other versions that I hold in high esteem? I'm not quite sure what the ranking would be, but I really, really like it. I really like it. David Colby says TNG season 1 and 2 are wildly overhated. I enjoyed them both immensely. It was a huge relief considering how much I didn't like DS9. I was worried I just hate everything now. I will agree with you to a point. I mean, I definitely think season 2 is overhated. I actually don't think season 2 is that bad at all. There are a couple of bad episodes in season 2, but overall, I think TNG season 2 is way better than its reputation suggests. I still think season 1 is pretty rotten. There are some good episodes there. And I mean, the last time I watched season 1 of TNG, it was not as bad as I remembered it. It was not as bad as I sort of had held it as being in my imagination, but it was still pretty fucking bad. Like, there are still some really, really, really lousy episodes. Quite a few of them in season 1. So yeah, but as far as season 2, I agree with you completely. Season 2 is actually a fairly strong season. Some random geek, could you guess who is the online communist? I had a guess. Well, 255 AD, I didn't see. If you edited, I didn't see it, dude. I'm sorry. I don't go back. I don't go back and reread the questions after I've pasted them into my script. Okay. I've told you this before. If you're going to ask a question, probably the version of it that, I mean, I didn't collect the questions until today. Like, I saw that there were questions earlier in the week. I didn't actually grab everything and paste it into my doc that I show on screen until today. So if I missed your edited question, I apologize, but I feel like I've told you this before. you know. Oh, Daryl has some suggestions for late seating. War of the Roses, Falling Down, and Justice for All. I will bring those up to Jason. I mean, Jason has more. I mean, technically, I choose the movies because I do the blind choice with A, B, or C. But Jason is the one who decides what A, B, and C is. So he has more input than I do. But I'll bring them up to him. Falling Down would be interesting because I've never liked that movie, but among certain people, it is very admired. So it would be interesting to watch that again and review that. 55 AD says, I wanted to point out something potentially problematic in Bride of Chaotica. Tom tells Harry something like he's not leading man material when he asks to play Proton for once. The Woman at Warp podcast pointed out the reason Harry wouldn't look right as Captain Proton is because Asian men didn't get to play heroes in 1930s Hollywood. Well, okay, but that's something problematic about 1930s Hollywood. That's not necessarily something problematic about Bride of Chaotica. I mean, yes, that unfortunately that is true. That if the episode was a literal 1930s serial, a person of Garrett Wang's or Harry's, ethnic heritage would not be cast as the lead. But, I mean, you can maybe read Tom saying you're not leading man material as an unintentional and unfortunate reminder of that. But I don't think that makes the episode itself problematic. Kira, I think that's going too far. Christopher Reeve is the only real Superman. No, there have been way more great live action Supermans than there have been bad ones. I'm hard pressed to think of a truly lousy live action Superman. I mean, and even the what's his fucking name? The guy who played Superman in the Zack Snyder movies. What's his fucking name? Henry Cavill. I knew it was in there somewhere. Even Henry Cavill's Superman isn't bad because of him. Like, it's not Henry Cavill's fault that his Superman is lousy. It's the writing and the direction that makes that Superman bad, not the actor. So I mean, yeah, Christopher Reeve is probably my favorite, but I mean, George Reeves was fucking great. Even Dean Cain, and Dean Cain in real life is a terrible person, but on screen as Clark and Superman, he was terrific. Brandon Routh in Superman Returns, he only got one shot at it, at least on the big screen. He got to do it again on the CW, but I mean, Brandon Routh was great. You know, Tom Welling, even though he was playing a very different version, he was playing sort of like teenage Superman, but still, Tom Welling was terrific. Like, there have been way more really great Supermans than there have been unacceptable ones. So, I mean, I think Christopher Reeve is my favorite, but I don't think it's fair to say he was the only one. Steve Schmeling says, my favorite Fleischer Superman is the magnetic telescope. Do you find the electric earthquake problematic? I mean, the villain is a Native American guy, and his motivation is that he wants to reclaim Manhattan Island from the white people. So, I mean, casting an indigenous person as the villain and making that their villainous motivation is problematic. Yeah. But it's not even close to the most problematic Fleischer Superman cartoon, I don't think. I think the anti-Japanese ones are way worse, much more overtly racist than the electric earthquake. Yeah, I mean, those. I mean, God, there's an episode called The Japators. Problematic. Also, I think what is it? Is it Jungle Drums? That one's pretty problem. Yeah, electric earthquake is a little problematic, sure, but it gets way out problematic by a couple of other ones. Here's a super chat from Kirak 2011. Explain one thing to me. How do you like Bride of Chaotica and not worst case scenario? At least worst case was the result of espionage. I just think one is better than the other. I mean, I don't think worst case scenario is a bad episode. It's just kind of pointless. And it just doesn't really grab me. I mean, Bride of Chaotica has you know, it's the stylistic stuff, the pastiche of 1930s serials. It just has a much different, more fun, more adventurous, more lighthearted tone. You get to see the cast hamming it up, especially Kate Mulgrew. It's just a way better episode in a lot of different ways. Like, the reason for the holodeck malfunctioning isn't really that important to me. If the rest of the episode is good, you know, worst case scenario just seemed like a not fully explored concept, whereas Bride of Chaotica just is a ton of fun. So I just think it's a better episode. Spielcab von Sparta says, I think taking the occupation of Bajor as an allegory to the Holocaust isn't appropriate. It wasn't a systematic and industrial extinction of a group of people like the Nazis did. Well, just because it's not a perfect one-to-one parallel to the real situation doesn't mean that it's not a useful allegory. I mean, I think obviously, even though the exact nature of the occupation is not identical to the exact nature of the Nazis' extermination program of the Jews, I still think it's pretty obvious that it's meant to be a Holocaust allegory, that the Bajorans are meant to be the Jewish people, and the Cardassians are meant to be the Nazis. I think the creators of the show have said that. Now, that doesn't mean it's the only way you can read it. I mean, a lot of people have said that it's also reminiscent of Israel and Palestine. And it's not a perfect match for that either, but you can read it that way, you know. So I mean, to me, just because like it can still be an allegory. It doesn't have to be a perfect one-to-one match of the thing that it's referencing. I feel like that's a not necessarily a mistake, but it's a level of inflexibility that a lot of people have when they're interpreting things. Like, oh well, there's all these things about the occupation of Bajor as depicted in the show that are different than what the Nazis did. Therefore, it's not a good comparison or it's not a good allegory. I just don't really think it works that way. Super chat from Stephen G. Clenard. I think the super fans will accept RDM directing Star Trek Legacy as long as he directs Nick Locarno and not Tom Paris. Well, obviously, Nick Locarno has to be in it. Clearly. Steve Schmeling, I've seen a few of them. It's been a while, but yes, I have seen a few of the racist Warner Brothers cartoons. Yeah. Oh, and Kirok, the noir of the episode is part of it. I don't know if I would say noir. I mean, it's not really noir. Just because it's black and white doesn't make it noir. But yeah, the 1930s adventure serial stuff. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Because I mean, for me personally, because I like that stuff. Like one of my favorite genres is mid-century sci-fi adventure fiction, like pulp sci-fi. I love that. So it's one of the big reasons why I love Star Trek, because Star Trek is a form of that. It's a form of pulp sci-fi. And like I say in the review of the episode, like it's the most natural thing in the world for Star Trek, which is in many ways a child of that kind of pulp sci-fi, to pay tribute to it in an episode. I thought it was really cool. And it's just like I said, it's just a really fun, enjoyable episode. Super chat from the Lady Eternal. Thank you very much. Says, love your content and thank you so much for your hard work. Please dial back your disparaging of fanfics. There are authors out there putting more care in than paid screenwriters and succeeding where shows let us down. I appreciate the super chat and I appreciate the thought there. I don't think I've ever been unfair to fanfic as on the whole. Like, I've never denied that there are very good, very talented fanfic authors. But I'm not going to pretend that fanfic as a whole is characterized by incredibly high level excellent writing. Most fanfic I've read has been garbage. That's not to say that there aren't, like I said, there aren't incredibly talented writers doing it. I think there are, but do they represent the average level of it? No. And even relatively well written, like a lot of fanfic, it's not so much that it's not well written, but it's written from a point of view and a perspective that I don't think belongs in an actual show or movie or whatever it is. A lot of relatively well written fanfic is about filling in blanks or drawing connections between things or explaining things from the canon shows or films or whatever. And I just think no matter how well done that is, that most of that is just a waste of time, and not the kind of thing I want to see in the actual show. So, but no, I mean, I've never tried to say that there's no such thing as well written fanfic. I mean, of course there is. And yeah, as people in the chat, I've written some fanfic. I don't know. I mean, some of it I'm happy with. I wouldn't say that it qualifies me to write, just because I've written some Star Trek fanfic. I don't think that qualifies me to write for Star Trek. In fact, ironically, if I were the showrunner for a Star Trek show, the fact that I wrote Star Trek fanfic would probably be disqualifying. I wouldn't want to hire fanfic writers. Kara says, I may have asked this already, but is it true that Trump could still run for president from jail? Absolutely. Absolutely. He could still run for president from jail. Stephen G. Clenard. Speaking of like fanfic moments, Agent Daniel stole my lunchbox. Yep. Jonathan Stewart, have you been keeping up with the recently concluded failsafe Zur-En R arc in the comics? No, I have not. David Colby, the real problematic thing about Bride of Chaotica is upon watching it, I kind of want a full TV show about Captain Proton instead of Voyager. Yeah, I mean, it's tempting because, like, again, like I love those original, especially Flash Gordon, but I mean, for Captain Proton, there's a lot of Flash Gordon in there, but there's also a lot of Commando Cody, like Radar Men from the Moon, and what's the other Commando Cody one? Zombies from the Stratosphere. It's technically not Commando Cody. They changed his name, but it's basically Commando Cody. I love that stuff. I love that stuff. And you watch it, you see how it's represented in that Voyager episode, and it looks so good. I mean, it's the beautiful black and white photography, but it's modern, so it's crisp and sharp and clear. And it's like, oh man, I would love for there to be a show like this, you know, that took that aesthetic, but, you know, used it in a more modern way and did something maybe a little tongue in cheek and a little self-aware with it. And oh man, and have that fucking robot, that fucking washing machine robot, or that water heater robot. That would be fantastic. But yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, it's a little different because this actually came true, but I still think the second season of Star Trek Discovery, all things considered, is the best season that show did. But one of my problems with it at the time, and I think I even said this in a video I made about it, it felt a little awkward that given the way they structured the season and the way they chose to end it on that sort of cliffhanger where Discovery goes into the future, and they wanted to save that for the next season. Like after Discovery went through the time warp, they didn't want us to see Discovery until the next season, but they didn't want to end with Discovery leaving either. So the wrap up was with the Enterprise crew. And I remember thinking it's a little weird that this season of Discovery ends with Captain Pike and Spock and Number One and everybody on the Enterprise. And it's like, should you really end a season of your show on a note that makes me want to watch another show that doesn't even exist? And of course, now, I mean, eventually it did exist. And in my opinion, at least, Strange New Worlds is an amazing show. I know we disagree on that, but now it exists. But at the time, it didn't exist. And there was no expectation that it would. So it just felt really weird for Discovery to end a season with, oh, and here's a scene from a completely different show that we're not even making, you know? And so the Captain Proton thing is a little bit like that. You know, it's like, this is so good, it makes me want to watch a completely different show. And I'm not sure if that's the effect that you were going for. Kirog with another super chat. Thank you very much. Says, I wouldn't be me if I didn't add my thoughts on NYPD Blue. Curious your thoughts. Isn't Bale loosely based on Dalto? And I think she would have worked out. Dalto would be the Denise Crosby character who was in for one episode, who was supposed to be the lieutenant, and then she got switched out for I forget his name, Isai Morales' character. I mean, it's the same idea. I don't know if if the character is supposed to be, if, you know, Bale is based on that character, but it's the same idea of just having a strict by the book lieutenant to lead the squad that was, you know, more antagonistic toward the cops. So it's the same basic idea. $2.85 it's fine. It's fine. Yes, Andrew, sorry, Satan's robot. Or as perhaps he would have been called in Angel, El Diablo Robotico. And yes, Satan's robot is awesome. Satan's robot is awesome. Ooh, Stephen G. Clinard. Who should Satan's robot have replaced? Neelix? I love that you call him Chipotle. Or Tuvok. I mean, I think the character of Neelix gets too much hate, but I would replace if the price of bringing Satan's robot in as a regular on Voyager was I had to kick off one of the other regulars, I think we could stand to lose Neelix. Because Satan's robot could step right into that role. Satan's robot could take over the kitchen and could be the new person ladling out the food. Wouldn't that be hilarious? Joe Gutierrez says, "Would you consider Star Trek Continues a well-financed fanfic?" Yeah, I think Star Trek Continues would be an example of not just a well-financed fanfic, but a well-done fanfic. There are a couple of episodes of Star Trek Continues where they are doing the fill in the blanks, connect the dots thing, and I tend to not like those. But the episodes of Star Trek Continues where it's not doing that, where they're telling stories that you can imagine would have been actual TOS episodes, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. You know, there are a couple of times where their nerdy tendencies get the better of them, and they have to do shit that is, you know, referring back to other stuff or you know, dropping in little Easter eggs for other stuff from elsewhere in the franchise. But for the most part, Star Trek Continues avoids that. It avoids that a lot better than Star Trek New Voyages. Star Trek New Voyages was always doing shit like that. And that was one of the things I felt like creatively really kept that fanfic series from, you know, hitting the same heights that Star Trek Continues did. When Star Trek Continues was done in a way where you could imagine, oh, this could have been a TOS episode, and the writing and the acting and the you know, the production was strong enough that it was like, oh, I could easily believe that this could have been an actual Star Trek episode. That's when it was really good. You know, when it was doing the fanficky connect the dots kind of thing, it kind of loses me. But thankfully, that was the exception rather than the rule. Kurak says, oh, but both Dalto and Bale come from IAB. Both are gay. Both are by the book. Sorry, I love Crosby. I think the idea of it would have worked, even though I like Lieutenant Tony Rodriguez. I mean, I do think, as I liked Rodriguez too, but I do kind of, I mean, it's tricky to go back and say, well, they should have done this instead of that. But I think the Denise Crosby as the lieutenant could have worked. I mean, yeah, it's a similar thing that they did with Bale. I think it could have worked. I think it would have been an interesting dynamic. You know, and it is a little, looking back, it is a little disappointing that it seemed like they were setting up something really interesting. And then it's like they chickened out at the last second and said, no, we're bringing in another good guy, lieutenant. It's going to be you know what I mean? It's like they tease you with this potentially really interesting source of tension that could liven up the show. And then they say, no, never mind. We'll just have a nice guy come in and be the lieutenant. Um, 255 AD says, do you think it would have been funny to film Bride of Chaotic at Vasquez Rock and explicitly acknowledge it? No, I mean, not explicitly as in, isn't that Vasquez Rocks? I wouldn't take it that far. But I think the way they did it in the episode was just fine. You know, with Harry noticing, like, gee, this looks just like the other planet. I think that's enough. I don't think you don't want to underline it and stamp it and point at it and go, look, Star Trek literally does this thing at this place. You know, like, I don't think you need that. That's too much. I think the way they did it in the episode was good. Steve Schmeling, watched your Star Trek Insurrection vid. You missed a Last Action Hero joke. Did I tell you I killed Mozart? Mo who? Not bad. Not bad. The Darth Eddie says, in this current era of streaming Trek, how do you feel that Enterprise stands up in comparison to the present day shows? Enterprise could be all over the map in quality, but at its best was amazing. I mean, I still rank Enterprise fairly low. Enterprise, I don't know if I would ever say Enterprise was amazing. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe Breaking the Ice was a really good episode, and Regeneration was a really good episode. I don't know if I would ever say that Enterprise was amazing. It had its moments where it was very good. But I don't know if I would ever say that I ever watched an Enterprise episode and I said to myself when it was over, that was amazing. I don't think that ever happened. So no, I don't. I still wouldn't rank Enterprise super high. Not, I mean, is it as it's better than Picard. So there you go. I think it's better than Voyager just because I think it maybe had a smidge more creative ambition than Voyager, at least at times. So I'll rank it ahead of Voyager for that. But other than that, I don't know. Well, and I think I don't know. I'd put it ahead of Lower Decks because I'm not a Lower Decks fan. So actually, maybe middle of the pack. There've been enough underwhelming Star Trek shows made over the years that maybe Enterprise would be kind of middle of the pack. Certainly not rock bottom, but I don't think the streaming era has altered my general perception of it. It certainly hasn't given me any new appreciation for it that I didn't have before. David Colby, I knew that Nostalgia Critic was a sinful, evil man the instant I learned he didn't love The Last Action Hero. Well, a lot of people with really, really shitty senses of humor don't like Last Action Hero. 255D, that would have been fine if they would have just had the location be Vasquez Rocks and it speaks for itself. That would have been fine. Oh, Kira, Enterprise does have a good cast. I mean, most Star Trek show, in fact, I think pretty much every Star Trek show has had a really good cast. I mean, Voyager has a fantastic cast. They're just not used very well most of the time. Even Lower Decks, which I am not a fan of, the voice cast is fantastic. Like, there are some incredibly talented people who work on that show. Tawny Newsome is amazing. Tawny Newsome is an incredibly funny actor. Like, she has been the bright spot in so many things I've seen her in. Like, she was in, they did a really awful Space Force show on Netflix with Steve Carell. And Steve Carell is great as well, but like the Space Force show was just fucking death. And Tawny Newsome was one of the few things on that show where I thought, oh, she's good, you know? And not, I mean, there were lots of great people, like fucking Malkovich is on it. There's all kinds of really talented people on the Space Force show. But Tawny Newsome was one where when I saw her on it, I was, and her bits in it are like, oh, she's actually pretty good in this. She's fantastic. Most Star Trek shows have had really great casts. I think all Star Trek shows have had really great casts, at least on paper, at least in terms of the level of talent of the people involved. Isaiah asks, will late seating cover Rambo? I hope so. I hope so. I hope so. I would like to. I would love to review all of the Rambo movies on late seating, but I think we'll probably only ever do maybe a couple. Sentai Roger Donnie, Lower Decks is my number 2 current Star Trek show so far. Well, let's see. What are the current Star Trek shows? There's 3, right? Currently. Because Discovery is over now. Picard is over now. Starfleet Academy is underway, but won't actually be released for a little while yet. And the Section 31 movie, again, is in production, but isn't due to come out for a while. So right now, in terms of shows that have aired and are currently producing episodes, there's Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Prodigy. So for you, Lower Decks is number 2 And for me, Lower Decks is number 3. Anyway, we're getting close to the end. So I'm going to do my typical wrap up, and then I'll come back and catch any final questions that folks have. So let me do my standard spiel to wrap things up. So first of all, thanks so much to all of you for joining me. Especially to those of you who were very generous with super chats this time around. I always appreciate that. Thank you so much. And to all of you who are patrons and members for being ongoing supporters of the channel. I could not do this without you. I thank you very much. If you enjoy this stuff that I do and you would like to help me continue to do it, you can become a patron if you are not one already by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives, or by clicking the join button to become a channel member here on YouTube. Not much really of a difference in terms of how much that helps the channel out. Both of those help me out a lot. And you both, whether you are a member or a patron, you get equivalent benefits. And one of the benefits that is relevant to what you're watching now is you get to submit questions ahead of time for these Ask Away live streams. Those are the questions that I answer in the first hour or so of the show. Those are pre-submitted by patrons and members. So if you enjoy my YouTube work and you would like to contribute to it and help me continue to do it, patreon.com/Steve Shives, or becoming a channel member. $1 a month is incredibly appreciated. $5 a month is appreciated 5 times as much, and so on and so on and so on. It just really helps me out. And I thank all of you who have made the decision to support this channel on an ongoing financial basis. It really, really means the world to me. Also, don't forget, in addition to YouTube stuff, I am on a couple of podcasts, one of which we have mentioned several times during this show. They are both part of the Let Me Listen family of podcasts. One of them is Late Seating, the movie review podcast that I co-host along with the wonderful and hilarious Jason Harding, where we take a look at classic films and see if they deserve their reputation, be it good or bad. Our current episode is Jason's birthday episode. We did my birthday episode earlier in the last month. It was Spider-Man 2. And now we have done Jason's birthday episode. And the movie he picked was 1980's Flash Gordon, which seems to be on theme for the week here because we watched Flash Gordon for Late Seating. And then I just did the Flash Gordon homage episode of Star Trek Voyager for my retro review this week. So you can hear our review of Flash Gordon on Late Seating. And also, in addition to that, the other podcast I'm on alongside Jason and the wonderful, brilliant Dana Cole is the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast. Now, the Ensign's Log is currently on hiatus. We finished our 6th season a couple weeks ago. So right now we're not making new episodes. We're going to take most of the rest of the month of June off, and then we'll be back into production for season 7 soon enough. Right now, I think our Ensign's Log end of season live stream with myself and Dana and Jason will be on this channel on Saturday, June 22nd. I think. We haven't nailed that down. That hasn't been carved in stone yet, but just kind of make a mental note. I think that the live stream for Ensign's Log this year will be on the 22nd of this month, but I will get back to you with more concrete information as soon as we've made a decision. But yeah, the Ensign's Log and Late Seating and all of the other great Let Me Listen podcasts, follow the link in the description to listen to those incredible shows that will change your life for the better or for the worse, or maybe won't change it at all. Anyway, oh, and by the way, another programming note. I should really have put a link to this in the description. Maybe I'll do that for those who catch up later. But don't forget, on Monday, on this very YouTube channel right here, on Monday, starting at 6 p.m. Eastern, I will be joined by the amazing Jesse Gender, and we will be doing a live stream together where we will be talking about Star Trek Discovery, which recently completed its 5-season run. And we will also be talking a little bit about Jesse's new movie that's coming out on Nebula near the end of the month. Jesse directed a movie called Identities, and it's coming out on Nebula on June 25th, I believe. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and hopefully get everybody excited to see that. And we're also going to talk about Star Trek Discovery. So myself and Jesse Gender on this very YouTube channel, Monday starting at 6 p.m. Eastern. Charitylinks.page. Thank you, Some Random Geek. Charitylinks.page. And also Geek was putting specific links into the chat earlier, so please make use of those. And also charitylinks.page, which has a lot of the links that Geek was putting in the chat and a lot more. Some friends of ours who need a helping hand financially. So if you have a few extra bucks lying around that you want to put toward a good cause, there are all kinds of good causes available in charitylinks.page. It takes you to a Google Doc with a bunch of links to PayPals and GoFundMe's and other crowdsourcing type things for folks who need a little bit of a hand financially. So please make use of that if you would. All right, I think that just about covers it. Let me go back to the live chat and see if there are any David Colby, you know what? I agree with you. David says, it kind of bums me out. There are no new Star Trek shows that are just ship goes around and looks at things without some gimmick or fan servicey callback. I agree. As much as I love Strange New Worlds, and that's something that we disagree on, but I love Strange New Worlds. I think it's a great show. But yes, I've said this before, I would love for there to be a modern version of what TNG was, which is a new show with a new ship, with a new cast, and nobody is anybody's son or cousin or stepfather or stepdaughter or adopted, whatever. No legacy characters, no connections to legacy characters, just a new ship and a new crew doing Star Trek stuff on an episodic basis, not a season-long storyline. Every episode is a new story. I would love that. Basically, Strange New Worlds without the legacy characters, or Voyager, but better written. I would love that. I really hope we can get something like that at some point in the near-ish future. That'll be wonderful. As much as I have enjoyed some of the a good bit, actually, as much as I have enjoyed a good bit of the newer Star Trek, I would love to get away from the fan service, get away from the legacy characters, get away from all the crutches, and just do new Star Trek with new characters. Cyberspace Cosmo, ever listen to the Delta Flyers podcast? I don't think I have. That's the one with Robert Duncan McNeil and Garrett Wang, right? No, I don't think I've ever listened to it. And Geek was not selected for jury duty. I thought maybe. Oh, Dana has a thing. Okay. Let's wait for Dana's thing, everybody. David says, I'd make it cheaper, hire sci-fi authors who haven't worked in Star Trek before, and my writing room would be write good sci-fi first, character second, Star Trek third. You're reading my mind, man. You're reading my mind. Not the Enterprise C. Not another Enterprise, Matthew. Not another Enterprise. Not a ship we've ever even heard of before. Oh, yeah, you told me a little bit about this, Dana. Well, I'm glad that it was taken out. I'm sorry that it turned out to be malignant, but I'm glad that it was taken out. And he's a good boy. He's a really good boy. He's a really sweet boy. And I hope he's okay. And I hope he gets better. Happy thoughts, definitely. Happy thoughts to Whitmore. Yeah. Happy thoughts for Dana's cat. All right. That will just about do it, everybody. Thank you so much for being with me. And I will see you on Monday with Jesse, and I'll see you on Wednesday with Dana, and I'll see you not next Friday, but Friday after next for another one of these. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good night. Have a good weekend. Take care.